Welcome to Cutting Edge Web Content Development, the podcast where we delve into the world of CMS systems and their crucial role in website and web content development. In each episode, we'll explore the reasons why founders, CEOs, CTOs, and CMOs of web content development companies need CMS systems to thrive in the digital landscape. Get ready to uncover the secrets behind successful website management, content creation, and seamless user experiences. Here's your host, Jonathan Ames.
Welcome to Cutting Edge Web Content Development, a podcast by Butter CMS. Today, we have a very special episode. We have 3 past guests who have all done an incredible job sharing their experiences and their understanding and insights with SEO. And they're all going to talk today about the unique challenges and opportunities of doing SEO for large enterprises. So if you're in a large enterprise, you're in the right spot. You got 3 gentlemen here who have a lot of experience and some insights to share. So let's start, guys, by doing a quick introduction. So we have Malte, who is basically a background in SEO and works with a large kind of, would you say it's a pricing company in Europe? Price comparisons. Yes. We have Patrice and we have George. Both of them work in agency environments and would love to get each of their insights on this. But let's start out by just asking, what are the differences you found working with enterprise clients, the unique advantages of it or the unique challenges? Go ahead, Patrice. You're ready to go. I can tell.
Yeah, I was just wondering who'd like to go first. So I guess in terms of advantages of dealing with enterprise SEO and enterprise projects, in terms of SEO, is just the sheer size of these projects sometimes allows us to discover new stuff about SEO and how things work. And yeah, obviously, sometimes the bigger budget is always a plus, because when you're working enterprise level projects, you have much more budget, so you can onboard a lot more professionals on the team that help you around. One of the main challenges, in my opinion, would be just the handling the rankings for different industries and different locations for the same company, especially when they're buying out other companies or mergers and acquisitions is the main issue usually, because you get companies that used to be competitors. Now they need to serve under the same domain. That's always the tricky part on knowing how to handle this migration process, what to redirect, what to keep on the website, what to remove from both of these domains, whether we should go for a new domain. In my opinion, those are usually the most common challenges we face in an enterprise level.
Yeah, excellent. Malte or George, any additions to that?
Happy to add to that. I would also agree the budget or also the people power behind project just at a different scale at an enterprise. Like I've been involved in projects where like 5 or 6 engineering teams were involved to orchestrate something, and then you can do really big things. I think the big challenge of enterprise SEO is you have to deal with a lot of politics. You need legal approval for a lot of things. I once was involved in a project where every single article, every change to every article needed both legal and medical approval. And if you look at the hourly rate of these people, it basically didn't matter how much salary we paid the person writing the text, because the review would cost at least 500, probably 1,000 euros. And that is just like for many SEOs, that's their budget for like two or 5 blog articles. And for us, it was like, let's change the paragraph here on this landing page. I think this is the drawback, how much sometimes is behind a small change.
Yeah, I wholly agree with what Patrice and Malte said. Exactly the same experience. I think one of the biggest advantages of doing enterprise SEO is that Google's algorithm is resolutely moving in the direction of brand building. And so you instantly have EEAT, experience, expertise, authoritativeness, and the trustworthiness if you're working with an enterprise brand. I think it's they're trying to move away from like the niche site and affiliate game. And if you have a website with diversified traffic and a clear brand around it, you instantly are at an advantage. I think Patrice and Malte hit on the clear disadvantage, which is the team really. Although you have a lot more people power to deliver things, there can be a lot of politics. And I've learned that the bigger the enterprise gets, the slower things tend to move, and people can be quite territorial over, well, this is our bit of the website that we control, and they might be a bit hesitant to the improvements or suggestions that you have. So you really need to use your soft skills to kind of convince why it's worth implementing the changes you're suggesting.
Yes. Yeah, definitely. All of those are important and big differences with enterprise. So here's a big question for you, Ed. When you first come into an enterprise SEO project, how do you prioritize the various things that you could do so that you get the things done that are important first?
And I'm happy to start. A former mentor of mine actually had a pretty nice approach here. And before we did anything, we would read the last 2 or 3 quarterly investor relations updates to actually understand what is on a super high level, the thing that the company is focused on. Because if a company is focused on profitability, you need to go with the projects that take 2 years or 3 years to pay off, right? But if they are totally focused on growth, you don't need to look into marketing efficiency. You need to look into new markets. So starting from the really, really high level, and something I still have in mind from my time in management consulting is get time with as many people as possible on the C-level and ask them what their personal bonus is tied to. Because in many enterprises, that tells you what will get done. And I once was involved in a project where we were supposed to do a website relaunch. It didn't work. But we knew that the VP of HR, he had his personal goal tied to a relaunch of the HR website. And at some point we were like, dude, just say you want it on a subdomain and we will get it done for you. And we got it done. It looked the same as the old website, just was modern technology stack behind it and actually could do some SEO with it. And maybe this is a very American approach to like go for like, what's your bonus tied to? But it actually works in a really large enterprise. It actually really works. And it tells you what people want to achieve. And if you go for something that as an SEO you find interesting, like maybe you think the hreflang setup is bad, you need to work on internationalization. If nobody on the C-level has any bonuses tied to that, don't go for it. Like go where the bonus is and hunt that down.
Yes. Yeah, there's definitely enterprises have a lot of inertia, and that inertia immediately goes away as soon as it's tied to some kind of bonus or some really important objective for them. Yeah, great point. So George or Patrice, anything to add to that?
I can go next if that's fine. So I actually learned this when working in my first SEO job in a startup, and it's kind of stayed with me ever since and never led me wrong. Especially if you're in a large organization where it has to go through a large chain of people, always try and prioritize things by impact and the effort required. So always try and find the highest impact action that you can possibly find that's going to be achieved for the lowest effort, and start with that. And then you kind of, as you work through the stack of projects or tasks, that scale kind of tips and inverts. So you start with high impact and low effort, and then you move all the way across to things that are high effort but low impact. And the benefit of that, especially if things move slowly in a larger organization, is you get the kind of really quick wins done first. You then have the main bulk of your time to focus on the things that are impactful, but that require a little bit more effort. And then if you run out of time towards the end, or you need to move on, you're only left with things that will probably take a lot of time and won't really achieve that much. And then you are in a position where if the objectives need to change, you can move on. I think echoing Malte's point on making sure that it's robustly tied to the actual objectives of the business is absolutely crucial as well. It's more important to make sure you're achieving the goals of the business rather than achieving like the perfect optimization of the website.
I know one of the things, usually when you're doing that list, the way you're talking about with high impact and low effort, by the time you get to that middle point, a whole bunch of new high impact will show up. And so it's really hard to get down to that stuff with the inverted list like you were talking about. Yeah, but good points. Good points. Patrice, anything else to add to that?
Well, I'd just like to echo the point George made about the impact of the projects that you're pursuing when you're launching, when you're dealing with enterprise SEO. And for me personally, and for our agency, we usually just, most of the focus is on the business objectives, like what is the business objectives with SEO, because they have different kinds of business objectives, but what are the ones that are tied to our work so that we know what to focus on and what will basically ensure that we get a happy client, a long-lasting client, and that that client will have their objective of next year achieved when next year comes. Instead of just doing perfect optimization or optimizing for stuff that the client, I guess, is appreciative of, but it's not their end goal. we tend to look at the bigger picture. So what is their long-term goal? If they're a really huge company and they understand that SEO might take a lot of time, and they have tied that long-term goal they have on the business with their organic growth using SEO, then we usually prioritize that over most of the, let's say, not small stuff, but other details that can be fixed and have a quicker impact on the website.
Yeah, good points. All right, let's switch to the next question, which I think is most enterprises will deal with multiple languages. They're usually international, so they have to localize to multiple regions. So what are some strategies for international SEO for these large-scale enterprises?
I guess I should go first since the last question I was. It is my topic, I guess, because I've been dealing with that a whole lot with our last projects in the agency. And there's usually two ways we go about. We have some really adamant clients that really want to have subdomains for their different regions. Like they'll have uk.something.com or ul.something.com, whatever the target country is. And then we have the other approach, which is the more SEO preferred way by having folders within the website. So you'd have something.com/US, UK, CH, whatever the country is. And in terms of that, we most of the time recommend just going with a folder approach. That's the easier and more successful way. It's been proven that it works much better. The only complication usually is when we have a multi-location, multi-language website, because the default hreflangs and the redirects from different regions take a lot of time and setup in order to get them right, especially because some enterprises just want automatic redirection based on your location based on where you're coming from or where you're landing. And we know that's not really allowed by Google's guidelines and policies. So we really have to do a lot of educating. The technical stuff sometimes is not the hardest part. It's getting people to understand that we're going against the guidelines. But yeah, if you have a multi-country website or an enterprise, it's not as difficult as having multi-industry or a lot of industries targeted within the same country with a lot of languages. The more languages or countries that you add, you just add layers on top of everything else that you have. So usually that becomes a bigger problem when sorting out the issues.
We'll get to the multi-industry in just a minute, but let's stick with the languages. So George or Malte, any additions to that?
Yeah, I think you used a very important word already in your question when you said localize, because many, many times people translate content, but they don't localize it. And they don't realize that a text written by a native English speaker in the US is not going to read good for somebody in India, Australia, the UK. There are also many African countries where English is like an important language for the website. And it starts with something simple like the date format. But then it's also like, do you say fries or chips? Do you say candy cotton or candy floss? Do you say apartment or flat? Is it a cookie or a biscuit? Or there's the word solicitor. It can be a lawyer or it can be a pushy door-to-door salesman. Or the trainer, it can be a shoe or a coach. And it's really important to properly localize your content when we talk about an international strategy. And many, many websites don't do it well. And yeah, sometimes it's as simple as changing one or two words, but it's needed and readers will notice it and will trust you more or less based on this.
Yeah, and enterprises have the budget. They should realize a benefit from localization, whereas maybe a smaller company might not. But yes, very good point. Localization and translation, not always the same thing. Now, George, anything you want to add to that?
Yeah, I think Malte and Patrice perfectly summed up my view of this. I think the localization, I can't enforce what Malte said. That is so important. And if you don't actually speak the language yourself, you have to make sure that you have that trust in the translators and you invest in good translators and pay them a good salary to make sure that they are localizing the content. I think it's especially important as well because certain words, not only is it an instant trust thing, whereas if it's badly translated, it will put you off the brand or the company, but also certain words might mean one thing in one language, but they might be actually something quite rude or derogatory in another language. So you do need to be very careful with the kind of language that you're using, and just make sure you invest in the translation team and you really trust them to do a good job, because that will contribute to a really good and a trustworthy landing page. I think the other thing that you need to invest in, as Patrice said, is an amazingly good technical SEO, because as soon as you start getting multilingual and you start doing subfolders and things, there's huge capacity for things to go wrong. I can remember once we had a client who had subfolders across all of Europe and the US, and they were doing the automatic redirects, and they ranked really well in the US, but nowhere else, because Google's crawler kept getting redirected back to the US. And they said, why is this happening? And all we did was remove those redirects, and the traffic exploded, and we looked like superstars when we didn't actually really do anything. So I think that it's a huge technical minefield. So invest, if you're looking where to put your money, I'd say very good technical SEO and supported by a trustworthy translation team.
Great points. Sometimes the smallest little things like that, George, can make a huge difference. So now let's transition to the idea of multi-industry. So a lot of enterprises have business units, and each business unit might have a different industry that they're in. And so they may have one website where they're working with, solar power, and another one where they're working on, commercial vehicles. So totally separate industries, maybe connected by the same site. What are some of the things that you might do strategically to try to either take advantage of that or to mitigate the problems of having multiple industries in one site?
I'm happy to start. I think I'm more concerned with completely different business models than just different industries. Like if it's B2B sales of complex product, I really don't care if it's 2 or 3 or 15 industries. I think you just need to make sure you have logical folder structure, internal linking structure, make it clear to Google that certain topics are in certain subfolders and they are connected, and other topics are less connected. I'm much more concerned when there are very different business models being combined, like a B2B enterprise SaaS or services business, where that normally is very content marketing heavy, and where you have maybe 5 super important landing pages supported by 100 or 500 additional pages that are all handcrafted, where you can do manual keyword research. And then on another area, you have, a classifieds business where 5,000 URLs are created every day. And also 5,000 URLs are deleted every day because a used book is sold out, a flat is rented out. Or an e-commerce aggregator where everything is suddenly about scale and automation and nothing is done manually anymore. I think once you start combining these, it gets very tricky. And there I would definitely have the discussion to separate them out. And with the different industries, I would just make sure it's somewhat logically separated for Google, and then everything can actually profit from everything else.
Yeah, and I think that's something to be said, is that there are synergies that can happen, and that's really where the strategy comes in, is figuring out where those synergies can be. You talked about the minefields of like 2 totally separate business models, but yeah, George, anything to add to that?
I think it really comes down to how different the 2 industries are, as Malte was saying, because it really is, it's difficult to establish that authority and trust if they're just totally different industries, and you might want to separate it out. But if they kind of synergize, then that's fine, and you can keep it on the same domain. I think it's with this kind of situation, it's very, very easy to get bogged down in the technical side and how you're going to approach it from a purely SEO perspective. When it might actually be good to kind of take a step back and look at the unique customer journeys of kind of both models, and how they're going to approach using Google to learn about the business at what stage of the purchasing journey, and the unique touch points that you can intervene, and also what other channels they're going to be looking at. So does it start on social, or at what point, maybe it might not be the case that you want to get the organic lead all the way to the point of conversion. Maybe you then want to move them on to another channel, like, an email list or a social channel or a phone call if they need to call the clinic to set an appointment, or a consultation or a free trial. Maybe that's kind of the approach you want to take. And knowing that it's not just about taking both business models and taking the same approach of trying to convert them directly from organic.
Well, Malte and George said some really smart stuff about how to handle different industries in a website. And one of the main things usually is just the approach, the way you're selling to your customers or to your clients. For example, if you have a SaaS service, basically, that you want to market as an enterprise, And then you'd have something like an e-commerce or direct product selling. Sometimes it might just be a better idea to keep these domains different. So you'd have one for the direct to customer selling line, and another one that would handle all your B2B or your SaaS software that you're providing for these users. Because if we're dealing with an enterprise project, chances are most likely that their product as well is intended for other big companies, not for individuals, but other big companies that will use their software or platform to scale their internal processes or manage work. And therefore, the user journey is not really just about convincing them to convert on a short term. The user journey on the website is to make these other big companies understand that their product adds value. It might improve their processes. It might improve their product output, whatever it is that they're looking for in their business objectives. So that in relation to everything that was said before, I would just add that based on the industries being added to the website, if they are two different from each other, basically, if they differ in user journey, if they differ in approach on how you approach your clients, and the product itself, if it's a SaaS or if it's a product that you sell on a store, just have separate domains for both of these.
Yeah. I'll give you a real world example. There's a lot of investment companies out there that will acquire various companies that have what they feel some synergies between those companies. And so you have a larger parent enterprise, several acquired brands that have some synergies between them. And so their question is, how do we create SEO synergies between these separate brands? And this kind of moves into mergers and acquisitions. So let's say you have two, like you'd mentioned before, competitors that now are both purchased by the same company. And so they want to create synergies between those. Or perhaps it might be two compatible businesses that are not the same thing, but they could work for the same audience. So maybe you want to create some synergies between the content that's being produced between those. That's a real world example of, enterprise scale SEO, where you're suddenly bringing in these brands. And it's not just, how can we, make sure that they're on separate sites and such. How can we leverage the SEO authority that each of these sites have and use them to create a synergy so there's a greater possibility between the two? And anyone can jump on that one. Everyone's like, I don't know if I want to bite on that.
Well, if I may then, also mergers and acquisitions, this practical example that you gave about competitors being bought out by the same parent company, or just straight out one competitor buying the other competitor in the industry. There's a few strategical decisions that must be made very carefully, like which domain to merge into, whether one has better authority and makes more sense for you to be absorbed into the other's authority in the domain, or whether you just want to go ahead and buy an entirely new domain. Because let's say Google, for itself, bought a lot of other companies in Silicon Valley that were trying to compete with one of their products. In that case, Google might have decided to create Alphabet.com, their parent company website, in order for a search engine to understand that this is a parent company that has these separate divisions that offer different products and services. That might be one of the decisions that a really high-level officer in the company, in tandem with the SEO efforts, will have to make. And a lot of stuff will have to be carefully considered, because you don't want to lose value from any of the domains that are in your possessions, or just outright lose your access to any of these domains because you've been acquired. Someone has bought your company and you're being absorbed. And in the same time, you lose focus of what helped you basically become a competitor in the industry, which was your organic growth because you were smart about it. And then you lose access to your domain. It expired, someone else bought it, or something happens and you lose access, and then you lose this huge market share in terms of organic growth that could have been a huge boost, not only to you, but also to your parent company now. Because one of the reasons why companies or enterprises buy other competitors is because they see the potential and the value in the market for this new player in the company to bring in their own side of growth to the company. It's not just to eliminate what is competition in the market, but also to make your competitors' capacity for growth to yours, basically, added to your arsenal?
I'd say two things, really. Firstly, if you're working with a mergers and acquisition team, there's a little bit of disparity because the M&A team is going to be extremely focused on the legal side and the financial side, and they're not going to be thinking about SEO at all. But then because it's such a daunting situation for an SEO, they're going to be wholly focused on the technical side of the migration and which domain to use. And sometimes there can be a bit of a conflict of interest in the sense that you kind of lose focus of the core goal that's trying to be achieved. So I think when you're working with an M&A team, making sure that instead of going into the kind of technical jargon, trying to speak their language as best as you can. So highlighting the need for the legal concerns and also leveraging your authority and making sure that the merging and acquisition is as successful and compliant as possible, while also highlighting that it's also going to be compliant for SEO as well. I think the other thing to keep in mind from a kind of technical perspective is Google has recently announced that they're going to be clamping down on expired domains. So redirecting an old domain to a site to try and boost the authority. It's something that they've started clamping down in the update that's rolling out in the moment. So I think that with that in mind, if I was doing an M&A, I'd want to make it very clear that this is an M&A and not just the kind of black hat SEO tactic to try and boost the authority. So make sure you are very transparent. You create an acquisition page. You have some information about what the old company was. You link up to the right resources. If you can do any press about the M&A, make sure you go to local press and have them link back to your site to confirm that it is an acquisition, and just try and do it as compliant as possible and make it very, very clear, not only to users who might be confused about who the company's been bought by, but also technically to Google as well, that this is a genuine acquisition and it's part of leveraging a wider brand.
The only thing I would add is to never underestimate the impact it can have to move an existing content piece to a stronger domain. Like when the New York Times bought the Wirecutter, I think they doubled the SEO traffic within a few weeks and then increased it by another 50% since then. And such a, like they're basically unlocking value, right? By taking very good content and then putting on a very strong domain. I think this is a quite interesting and relevant part that for many M&As people don't think about, but actually can greatly increase the return on investment you get, or improve the value creation plan that's normally used.
Yeah, great points. Great points. So let's shift over to kind of process. So working in an enterprise environment, you're working with a lot of different people. The numbers in your team are usually much larger. How can you establish processes and workflows to streamline your SEO activities and your collaborations across multiple departments and teams? Any tips or comments on this?
Maybe I just continue. Communication in different formats. And format doesn't just mean email and Confluence page and wiki entry and presentation. It also means sometimes you need to do the high-level summary for the executives that's focused on dollar in, dollar out. Sometimes you need to give the motivational storytelling speech at the all-hands meeting. And sometimes you need a really deep technical dive on front-end engineers about rendering and how the Googlebot is caching JavaScript files, and repetition. One thing I learned very early in my career is one of my mentors told me, Malte, if you want to teach a group of adults and you want them to remember, you have to repeat it so often that you feel weird. And that moment where you repeat it, that you feel really cringe for saying these 2 or 3 sentences again, that is where half the people in the room actually internalized it and remembered it. And at the moment, I thought, this sounds weird, but it's been, I don't know, it was 10 years ago or so, and I really internalized it. It's absolutely true. You have to repeat your key messages again and again and again. And it can mean that for the next 1 year, whenever you have a certain meeting, there's just 2 or 3 sentences you keep repeating. Or if you give an update, be it a PDF file you send around, a presentation, an email, you just include this paragraph reminder, this is our focus for these reasons. If you have something that people need to remember, you need to repeat it again and again. I think that is the most important thing for cross-department SEO collaboration and making sure other teams actually remember that SEO exists and is a focus topic.
Yeah, great point. Even outside of SEO, that's a very valid point. Yeah, George, Patrick, anything to add to that? Process and workflows.
echoing what Malte says, I think there's a very common theory in marketing that it takes around 7 engagements with a brand before you convert. And it's exactly the same with sometimes it takes about 7 times of reminding someone to actually do something. So I think that theory is 100% applicable. I think from my side, the biggest thing is having a really, really robust set of SOPs, standing operating procedures, written in layman's terms that everybody can refer to. So step 1, do this, step 2, do that. And having it to a point where you can give it to, say, a content writer who knows very little about SEO, and they can produce a perfectly optimized article at the end. And the example I always use for this is the business McDonald's, which I think is one of the best businesses in the world. And the people who founded McDonald's have all been deceased for decades and decades. And yet in that time, they've maintained the exact same standards. The business has only grown and grown and become more profitable. And anywhere you go to a McDonald's in the world, you're going to have a consistent experience. And that's really because they have excellent SOPs and they can give it to a new hire and they're creating exactly the same product, exactly the same. And so I think just making sure you put the SOP in layman's terms, you have it on a decentralized resource like Google Docs. So if there's an update or Google changes something, you can just update the core document that everyone references, and making sure that everyone's referring back to the SOP and following the same process and no one's kind of going rogue. I think if you have a very systematic way of doing things that's, and you're just consistently doing it day in, day out, you're definitely going to achieve success.
Very good point. Going rogue is what everyone tries to do in the small startups, but in enterprise, you don't want that. You want consistency. Good one. Anything else? Patrice, you want to add anything to that?
Well, as a final note, I'll just combine the communication point by Malte and George's point about the SOPs, the operating procedures in a company, because you might already have workflows and processes set up in your company, or if you're on your agency and then you're dealing with an enterprise project. And then you just need to sit down and figure out whether your current workflow and process for content, for the technical side, for the on-page optimization, for the link building process, whether these workflows and processes will keep up with the needs of an enterprise project. And the way you do that, how you figure that out, is by having the right people on the table with you. Because you might have the best SOPs and the workflow processes set up and you're using them, but if the wrong people are sitting at the table, then these SOPs will not get you that far. And communication, on the other hand, the right people will know how to communicate that to each other, especially within cross departments. So content talking to link building and talking to technical side in order to push whatever is important for the enterprise in terms of growth and business objectives. So I'd say the final note would be just having the right people sit on the table, the right people, having the right processes, maybe finding your process works, but in order for it to scale, you need new positions, new people on the company. Sometimes you need less people on the company when you take on more complex projects, because some people might just stick around and make things be an unnecessary chain, or part of the chain that just taking stuff too long to get done. So a huge role, in my opinion, is finding out whether your set of people works, whether you need to add new people to the team, whether you need to get rid of certain positions, or whether you need to upgrade or evolve a certain position in your team in order to enable those SOPs and these teams to communicate with each other.
Yeah, great insights there. So I'm going to bring up the big challenge I think that enterprise has, probably the biggest challenge, which is that enterprises tend to be places where innovation is quashed rather than promoted. How can you foster a culture of learning and innovation within an enterprise SEO team so that you can have a competitive edge? Because typically it's enterprises acquire small companies because they still have that culture of innovation. But how could you do that within an enterprise SEO team?
I can start if no one else wants. I think lead by example. If you are a leader, that always works to some degree. Then like a very basic thing, like have actually learning budgets for people, but also give people time to learn. And I think what's very important, give people time and a stage to share their learnings, because often when one person in the team learns something, it's super interesting to also share that with the team. Because it's rewarding and it shows that, hey, actually learning is part of work and everybody should dedicate some amount of time. personally, I set also learning and development goals for team members. Like when they tell me I want to acquire skill X, I make sure we have some steps, and it can be as simple as read this book. And then also allowing for different kinds of learning. Like there are people who enjoy going to conferences, maybe who also enjoy the part of traveling to another country to learn there. There are also people who absolutely hate it, who don't want to do it at all. And there are people who prefer to read a book. There are people who just want to have some time to listen to random podcast episodes that they care about. Like maybe somebody's listening to this very podcast exercise, right? Because it's part of their learning plan. And other people prefer learning by doing. And I give every team member knows that there is a budget to go to conferences. I have team members who have gone to 0 conferences in 4 years because it's not what they want to do. And I think then you just need to accept, okay, different people have different ways of learning, and just accept that as long as you give them the time and then also the stage to share it if they learn something.
Yeah, really good point. I found that in my own teams that when I've tried a one-size-fits-all learning plan, it works really great with some people and not so well with others. So yeah, flexibility there, really important. Other comments on that?
Well, if I may, in regards to what Malte said about having a learning budget, so incentivizing people to learning new skills, I think that's also a good addition, like adding financial incentives for team members to learn new areas of the field, not just in SEO, but in the overall digital marketing field. Like, because someone might be really good at SEO, but they're being limited by the project scope. So allowing them a budget or incentivizing them to move into other areas of digital marketing, not just SEO, as a part or a channel of the industry. What else I've had is what I usually do actually with team members that are willing, like they want to learn something new, they need to innovate in order to progress in their career. I sometimes like just putting them in the dirt and then letting them find their way out. And because usually, in my honest experience, most of the people that I know that have made a significant advantage in their career, like taking 2 and 3 steps at a time, or people that have found themselves in a really bad position. And the only way for them to make it out and survive was to really innovate, become really creative at how they do their job and how they manage their time and how they manage their projects and everything else. And these skills, in my opinion, are not something that can be learned via teaching materials, conferences, and that sort of stuff. Because the real factor is not there, the risk. I believe in a lot of companies, what's undermined is the risk. Whenever people don't have the risk about losing something, they generally don't tend to give 100% of their maximum capacity. And that obviously limits their output and career progression.
Yeah, really good points. The risk motivation factor. George, anything you wanted to add on to that?
Yeah, I totally agree with tying it to a financial incentive. I think ultimately people can be, in any industry, quite selfish. But if you put in a scheme like a share your work scheme, so you say, okay, as part of your next appraisal cycle, I'd like you to learn about this topic, and then I want you to present it to the wider team. And then they can actually present and teach the team something, and then someone else will present to the group. And so each week or each month, you might have a different member of the team as part of their appraisal cycle presenting. And it kind of turns into a competition where it's like, well, I kind of want to do a better presentation than that person or that person. And everyone is doing these share your work sessions, but then at the same time, although it's because it's part of the appraisal cycle and the financial incentive, people are actually absorbing the information without realizing it. And they're getting really clued up on a lot of different topics. I think the other thing is I'm a big fan of the old Dale Carnegie book, How to Win Friends and Influence People. I think it's an absolutely incredible book. And one of the key things in that book is about identifying an inner want in somebody and making sure you tailor your pitch to that person's wants. So say, for example, if you want people to learn about the latest algorithm update, if you have someone who's really keen on progressing and learning and they want to get into it, you can say, hey, this is going to make you look good in front of the senior stakeholders. This is going to help you develop. This is going to help you reach that next level. But then conversely, if you have someone who's, say, a good performer, but they kind of just want to turn up and do what they need to do and then go home and they don't want to kind of do anything extra, the angle you sell that person is, hey, this is actually going to make your job easier. It's going to make it more efficient. It's going to mean you don't have to do so many steps. And there are things in this update that mean we can do things quicker, and you kind of sell them on that angle. So I'd say make sure you identify that inner want and make sure you pitch it to that person in a way that kind of appeals to their intrinsic motivation.
Very good points. I think something that I've seen with really great leaders is that they will find ways to break up their team's routines to kind of put them in situations that are a little different, because very few innovations come out of doing the same thing over and over again. It typically comes out of some kind of break in your routine where you see things from a different perspective. A good example, someone at the C-suite moving down in and talking with people, at the very bottom level of the company who are actually dealing with customers could find insights there that maybe reports that individual got on a weekly basis would never tell them. So breaking outside the routine, and sometimes that's why conferences are great for people. It's not just what you hear. It's just the fact that you got outside of your office and you're around these people who are doing things differently than you are. And so that's why I'm hoping from these podcasts is really that as people hear from each of your insights, it's going to break their routine a little bit and they're going to have their own insights that will come up. Hey, this idea is really good. I should try that out. Or it could even be a totally different idea. It's simply sparked by something that you've said or an experience that you've had. So let me ask one last question kind of on the tactical nature here of SEO at enterprises. Migrations, something that all companies have to do. Enterprises have more websites, so they typically deal with site migrations more often. Any tips that you would give to enterprise SEOs out there as far as mitigating the risks, ensuring a smooth transition when you're doing site migrations for whatever reason?
Well, if you don't mind, I'll go first here. And my first tip for all of the enterprises would be make sure you have a lot of checklists in place, because as many team members that you might have on the team, there's always the risk of you losing out on something, whether it's redirects, whether it's moving content over to the new domain or whatever you're being transferred to, being migrated to. Make sure you always have the right people on the team, the right SOPs, the procedure. You should have an SOP that is scalable with enterprise levels. Migrations, make sure you have the right SOP for an e-commerce website. If you have one, make sure you have a different SOP for a SaaS service. If that's your niche, make sure these people follow thoroughly these checklists, because they will ensure that nothing gets left out. And even if you don't have the procedure and the SOP, it might be worth just taking your own time into creating that checklist, just so you don't have any risk of losing out on traffic. And that's, in my opinion, boils it down to one of the ways you can risk or mitigate risk when doing migration. The other thing is having the right people working on the team. The second other thing would be choosing the right infrastructure, because you might be migrating, but you might be stepping into a danger zone, basically, because you're moving out from one really reliable infrastructure into another environment. And the new environment might not be the best fit for your needs, even though in first glance, it looks like it does. Never fully migrate without having a testing or a staging site on the new environment, where you can basically test out all the capabilities that you need, not just for now, but for your future plans as well. So future planning takes part into this. You have features that you want to build into your product. Make sure these new features are compatible with your new environment where you're migrating to. And then finally make that push the button and migrate.
Excellent points. So good checklist. Make sure you have the staging area. Excellent. George, Malta, anything to add to that about migrations?
Yeah, like on the tactical side, I would add doing a pre-mortem, like a meeting where you get some people together and you just discuss what could go wrong. Or I once even had the meeting where the person facilitating said, okay, imagine we are the competitor and we want to make it go wrong. What would we do? And then often you come up with a couple of points where you actually think, yeah, we should talk to this team about that. We should make this known in advance. If it's a really big migration with your own IT team, really make sure you have an incident process to raise an alarm where you are like, stop, we need to do something else. And then make sure people in the SEO team also know this process and can work on it. Or if you have external SEO consultants, make sure they actually have a way to trigger this incident, not write an email and then wait 5 business days until somebody realizes, we accidentally shipped the no index tag to important landing pages. And then monitoring and alerts. As soon as a website has a certain scale, you just need automated checks and you need alerts that are sent out, and you need to also know who is responsible to react to an alert, investigate it. Those would be my points.
Yeah, great points, Malte. A lot of good ones there. George, anything to add to that?
Yeah, I entirely agree with what Patrice and Malte said. I think having an extremely clear checklist process and making sure that you have an incident report so that if something does happen, you can very quickly roll it back. I think it's important to document as well, because when you're migrating to websites, there's a big risk of, a huge decline, which could contribute to a big loss in revenue. And that you then in a situation where someone might be looking at losing their job. So it's extremely important that you make sure you get this right. You make sure you have the incident report. I totally agree. I think also make sure you do a content audit. And this kind of goes back into what we were saying with mergers and acquisitions, like how can we leverage the strengths of each domain? But say if you have 2 landing pages or 2 pieces of blog content that are on similar topics, you can then start to audit, okay, do we want to combine these into a super piece of content? Do we want to maybe choose one piece of content to copy over? Is it going to make more sense if we put this piece of content on this domain? And not just focusing on the technical, but also going that extra step further to make sure that we're also launching with good content as well. And we're not trying to tie up loose ends post-migration, just so we can really hit the ground running. I think that's probably what I'd add.
Yeah, excellent advice. Excellent advice. Gentlemen, I really appreciate all of the insights that you brought about enterprise SEO. I know we've gone through quite a few things, but we still really only scratched the surface. If people want to get a hold of you after this podcast, can each of you just quickly say how people could get a hold of you and how they might connect if they're interested in discussing these points further? Malte, do you want to start off?
Just search for Malte Landwehr on LinkedIn and follow me. I think connect with me there. It's the best way to get in touch.
Excellent. Patrice?
Well, for me, it would be the same. So just hit me up on LinkedIn at Petrit Halidei. Maybe you'll mispronounce it, but I'll probably still show up at the top of results. And in the future, I'll be launching my own website as well. So petriteseo.com. That will be going live pretty soon enough, where people can see via the contact form.
Excellent. Well, send us the URL for that. We'll put that in the notes. George?
Yep, same for me. Just search George Shooter on LinkedIn. Currently working as head of SEO at Gear for Music. That's the best way to contact me. I'm always happy to chat through anything SEO related.
Excellent. Gentlemen, once again, appreciate all of your insights. Thank you so much for everything you did today.
Cutting Edge Web Content Development is brought to you by Butter CMS. To find out how you can build better with Butter, stop wasting dev time, and free your marketers from your legacy CMS, visit buttercms.com. Also, make sure to search for Cutting Edge Web Content Development in Apple Podcasts, Spotify, and Google Podcasts, or anywhere else podcasts are found. Make sure to click subscribe so you don't miss any future episodes. On behalf of the team here at Butter CMS, thank you for listening.